Hey, how are you? How's everyone? How's
Hey,
everyone? Thanks.
Well,
How's everyone?
doing
Thank
well.
you for being
Great.
here. John, it was great. You're finally in. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties, but you're in. Thank you so
Yeah, I
much.
had to disable all my extensions, all my ad blockers and everything. So
Okay. Thank you so much for everyone being here. This today we have in the show 3Charts at 3 p.m. We have data visualization related to HR, and I cannot be more glad to have my friends here, this panelists of amazing individuals here. We have John Miller. I wanted to say something about everybody here. I mean, I think that never had such a panelist with so much work and so much experience together. We have John, John Miller. He's the founder and chief people analyst of Visible HR. I mean, John, you have been doing this for easily 15 years, right, or more, I think.
yeah, close
Visualizing
to
data
20.
exactly related to HR. It is so important. I was talking with Corey before the show about how this data is so important nowadays. He's the global director of HR technology at Avid. And Corey, why do you think it's so important to nowadays after we're going through COVID and now we have this type of data that is so important for companies? I was looking at data visualization that track, if people are happy at work, retention. I mean, you name it, anything, human capital. What do you think is so important? You were telling me.
yeah. So I'll just start by saying I think it's an age old adage, right? Folks who are happy to enjoy what they're doing tend to be more productive, right? And I
Mhm.
don't think any organization out there wouldn't want happier and more productive employees. So I think now is a very interesting time, both to understand the human capital at your organization, but also to understand a little bit what's happening in the market around you. So just ahead of this call, we talked a little bit about employee engagement and how Gallup had shared that in summer of 2020 when we were all going through the digital revolution that came along with COVID, um, some normative data around an all-time high in their measurement of engagement, despite a global pandemic, which obviously had some negative things along with it as well. So I think it's really important for organizations to be aware of that and think
Mhm.
very thoughtfully as they either plan to come back to the office or just shift their entire perspective on, working all together. So yeah, that would be, I think, kind of my quick response to that.
And then we have Jeffrey Baker who's been using and working with a specific this type of data, to understand how to use human capital better at a Wells Fargo. He's an analytical manager at Wells Fargo. So, Jeff, how do you use this type of data currently on Wells Fargo? What do you think is so important?
So I support the technology services organization, and we literally get a nightly refresh of the non-sensitive HR data feed, and that's critical for us because it helps us know, how many people do we have, where are those folks, what kind of line of business are they in. It gives us a demographic that we need to know. So if you think about things like the return to office strategy, right, knowing, well, where do we have critical masses of our folks at, and what are the support expectations we might have for those people. So much of that key data can be found right there in that HR feed, so it's one of the most important visualizations that we produce.
Awesome. Awesome. I want to go back to John. John, can you tell me, like, I don't know, last couple of months, what do you think is being those asks or this most important you're doing for clients related to this data? Why is so important that people understand how to get great insights from this data?
yeah, it's a great question, and I think a lot of what has happened and transpired over the past year, not only from the pandemic side, but also what's happening in our culture as America is evolving and people are looking to have their voices heard. You'll see a lot more interest in diversity, equity, and inclusion data.
Mhm.
Organizations are trying to understand what is happening, not only from a cultural perspective outside of their organizations, and then how does that relate to the people inside their organizations? And what kind of movement are we seeing amongst those people? Are they leaving? Are they coalescing? Are there greater participation in their employee resource groups and things of that nature.
Awesome. Awesome. I think this data, for example, here at Data Meaning, we have worked with, doing some type of using visualizations related to, human capital to understand also better what are the skills of the people that we have in our company, right? Things like that. How can we use them correctly? How can we be more efficient when we are working on different projects and things like that? So this data, it's honestly, it's endless what you can do with this data in regards to your organization. I think that's what's so important. We also wanted to have the opportunity to have this conversation now that we're in November, close to Thanksgiving. That's what the hat is all about, Thanksgiving next week, because we think that there's so many people out there, that are looking to maybe change jobs or going to another company, or if you're an HR manager somewhere, you're looking at this data right now. By the end of the year, probably in January, you're going to have a new budget, and you're going to put some jobs out there. So that's what we wanted to talk about, this data right now, this time. Also, Data Meaning is hiring. We want to take this opportunity to Data Meaning, as the company that is sponsoring us to do this show, and we're hiring. So if you can, please apply we have many jobs available, and we're being very proactive, pushing those jobs right now instead of waiting for next year. So if anybody's interested, go there and find whatever you want, and also contact us if you want to ask or have any questions about Data Meaning. But I wanted to keep going forward. Let's go and let me talk about a little bit about the show. So if this is your first time here watching, please know that this show is about data visualization, right? Each one of us, Corey, John, and Jeffrey, they have a data visualization that none of us have seen before. And the idea is for us to discuss this data visualization in real time with also you the participant that is in the chat. And they can be good or bad. It doesn't matter, because the idea for us is to learn how we can make them better. And what can we learn from this visualization, from the specific data that we're talking today, HR data. The best part is that you can be with us as a panelist like them. We have a sign-up sheet. We're going to put it soon in the chat. And you can sign up for any other week. We have every single week until almost next year, where you can sign up with us, find a topic that you like. For example, next week, we're going to discuss Thanksgiving data. There's going to be a lot of pies and chickens and turkeys and a lot of good stuff. And we're going to have that on the November 24th. We're always doing the show at 3 p.m. on Wednesdays, 3 p.m. Eastern. And you can be a panelist with us and have a lot of fun. This discussion, is very informal, because we want this to be, like some friends talking together about data visualization. That's the idea here. And hopefully you want to join us. Like I said, in the chat is going to be the link to the sign-up sheet for the future shows. And now I want to talk to you about a little bit of the first time that you've been in the show. I want to talk to you about what are those 3 questions that we're going to discuss today. So Curry is going to show us a data visualization. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, what is this all about? What insights can I gather? Is there anything that is not clear? And what can I do to make it better? What can I do to improve this visualization? And then from there, the idea is for all of us to learn how to collaborate together, how we can learn visualization best practices, and more importantly, to learn more about this specific data, specifically today, HR data, very important data for nowadays. So thank you so much. Let's start. Curry, show us your visualization.
Sure.
Tell us what it's about. Yeah.
Bear with me 1 second just to share my screen. And if someone can give me a shout as soon as you can see it, that would be fantastic.
We can see it.
Awesome. So I will give everybody just a quick second to digest what you're looking at. And I will say I did provide this visualization as it was presented. So one of the things I'd like to call out before I get into the 3 questions is it is not interactive. It was a flat chart that was presented, and there was context obviously presented with it. But I just wanted to pull out only the visualization and then have the conversation, that I think we could pull out via those 3 questions. So just at a quick high level, the data that you're looking at is obviously it's a line chart, some longitudinal analysis over time. And in particular, you'll see two lines in there that are distinguished by the dimension of color, and they represent two different bits of data. So on the top side, or at least at the top of the screen around the data clarification portion, hopefully you can see my pulsing cursor. So that is, it's a 3-month moving average of median wage growth for folks who ultimately stay with their organization. And then dichotomously, the pink line or reddish hue is the wage growth tracker, same concept, 3-month moving average of median wage growth for folks who ultimately considered job switchers or individuals who have new jobs. So do you want me to dive into the 3 questions, or do we want to have folks react?
Yeah, let's see what Jeff, what do you think when you first was looking at this visualization? Let's see and then we can go back to Curry.
Perfect.
Yeah. So the context is really great set up there. So appreciate you going through the details, because I know you knew a little bit of background about this. I personally really you can see the difference that stands out if you're willing to change jobs, to the impact of what that can mean to your salary perspective. There is that very huge spike there at the very end of the line graph that really snaps out. Mm-hmm. And then I also noticed that the highlighted area in the bar there, somewhere between, I don't know, what is that, 7 to 10 or something, somewhere in that range, 7, 8, 8.5, that kind of really starts to bring some focus on what that significant drop is. And so I'm curious as to, what's driving that drop at that moment in time. And maybe the back end data talks to that a little bit. I'm not sure, but I really love how simplistic it is. And it's really, the legend helps you see what it's all about. I would like to hover over with my mouse and see more for it to be interactive, right? But I think it does a pretty good job.
What is Curry? What is the 5, 10, 15, 20 underneath?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think I don't want to jump in ahead of what might be a bit better, but that is the calendar year. So you start to think about what was happening, and you call it out. Yeah. That's exactly right. It's right around that 2008 timeframe. When obviously there was, a global recession, obviously kicked off by some of the macro events here in the United States, right? We noticed the housing, decline. There was obviously a lot of just job loss altogether, the net decrease of businesses during that time. So to speak to a little bit, of what you made mention to, John, but I will, so this is not my visualization. And interestingly enough, because I think there's a lot of data in here, and I will start with what I think is good. So sometimes I'm a believer of, quotes, one of which is if someone says it better than you, just quote them versus say it yourself. And Ryan Sleeper, who, I don't know if everybody's familiar with his name, but those who are in the Tableau space probably have heard of his name. He's the founder of Playfair Data and a big namesake in the Tableau space. But I think between line and bar charts, you could probably go your entire career and use just a combination of those two things and be okay. So I will start by saying, in terms of looking over a large data set over time, that longitudinal analysis, I think the line chart is kind of the perfect visualization type. Just to start by, I think what is really, really done and done well. And John, you called it out, and I'm going to attempt to zoom it here. But the article that this was attached to was specifically focused on this big spike. And it's exactly what you were just mentioning or inferring, John, in terms of there is not only, at least over the last decade or so, some differentiation on the positive side if you choose to leave your job, but there seems to be, and again, going back to the data, maybe opportunities for what could be better, a large spike, potentially a statistically significant spike over the real recent history. So again, 3-month moving average. And I'll scale back out, you kind of look at the time frame. really talking about now, right? Calendar year 2021. So I'll pause there if we want to, move to some of the other questions or comments.
So John Miller, like, what do you think when you saw it the first time? Like, what do you think about, like, is this something that you remember when you were working through this many years, right? Hopefully you remember this.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think it's kind of intuitive, right? These are the things that you see by working in and with HR data, is that people leave their current job, they go across the street, and they get a significant pay bump. I think my mind, immediately goes to is, okay, so an organization sees this data, what can they do about it, right? So right to kind of action planning. You can't just offer everybody an increase in pay. What can you do to kind of retain your employees or make their employment situation a little bit sweeter? And I think, you start talking about long-term incentives, that certainly comes to mind. But that's where my mind goes, is what can you do to address this issue, right? We put the data in front of an executive, we highlighted the discrepancy. The insights are pretty obvious at first glance. And so now what can you do? How do you leverage this data for action planning?
Yeah.
Can I just add quickly, hearing that from John, I couldn't agree more. And I think we started with this, right, really when we were kicking off the session, which is this notion of how can organizations look at that employee value proposition. I'm a big believer of open and honest dialogue with staff. I don't want to get too much into what we do here. That's not the intent of today, but exactly like John is mentioning, dollars, there's a clear correlation, right? That you can leave your job and go get paid more. But I think understanding what the value proposition of working at your particular organization, or from an HR strategist perspective, how can we potentially, I think, John, you said it nicely, kind of sweeten the pot. And I do think that there's some ways where you can actively engage with your workforce, ask and understand those questions, and use some basic descriptive statistics too, because you're not going to, listen, there are no silver bullets in life. You're not going to please everybody, but I think you can focus in on kind of the critical mass and really help your organization work more effectively and ultimately save dollars, right? Because the flip side of this is, for every leaver as an organization, you have to go find that replacement, which we know that there's an inherent kind of cost of that turnover.
Correct.
One thing that I think of as I'm looking at this chart is it tends to be summing up whatever the company is, right? It's like, it seems like it's providing that holistic, the entire organization view. I think it would be really interesting to see, what does that chart look like if we're looking at pure like technology people versus HR people versus, specific lines of business. Are there different gaps out there based upon the type of role that people have? That would be really interesting to see this kind of data for.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And then even, to build upon that, if you can layer in labor market data, right, to understand, geographically or by job function, to your point, software engineers, there's a high demand and a low supply, generally speaking, right now.
Right.
So depending on the job function, job family, location, those would probably, you'll see discrepancies within this data.
I couldn't agree more with the panel. And the only thing I will add to that major spike on the right-hand side is, is that very topically impacting, some of the recent impacted industries, like the service industry, as an example, where we hear the terms like that, the Great Resignation, and is that influencing? So just as a clarifier, this is total aggregate market data, but I couldn't agree more that additional dimensions would only make the information more powerful.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We have someone from the chat, Joe Warrington. He said, what are your favorite HR platform? Any have the best and easiest data to analyze? What do you think, Burley?
Sure. I apologize. I hit my laptop there. I've worked on a handful of bits of technology, both on-prem and in the cloud. And truth be told, I think the company that has the best, most defined processes will have the best HR data. So today, the core HCM that I work with is Workday. I am a big fan of Workday and what that organization's been able to produce from a sheer technology perspective. I think the user experience is pretty awesome. But listen, just like, to quote a corny 80s song, every rose has its thorn, right? So Workday
Yeah.
has an object-oriented model that is a little bit different from a traditional relational database on the back end. So I would only go back to my earliest point to say, if you truly focus on defined processes, I think there's a lot of, applications that can work when you factor in the size of your organization, the type of industry and work that you do. But I would really say that it's people, processes, and systems. And to me, systems come last, right? They're really it's how you take an abstract process and you kind of record a transaction. Like that's what a system does, particularly a core HR system. But I really think the companies that have an advantage are those that define and really, if they can and if it makes sense for their business, right, kind of simplify and make uniform those HR processes.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah, I would agree with Corey. I think it all comes down to your processes. And I deal a lot with recruitment data. And you'll see in recruiting data, I always make the comment to folks that recruitment data is so challenging because when you are dealing with your core HR data, your population, right, your world is however big your organization is, right? 20,000, 50,000, 100,000 people. When you're dealing with recruiting data, your population of potential data is the entire world, right? So and people enter data in all sorts of fashions. I agree Workday is nice in that it has kind of parameters that people are bound to when they're entering data, for example, or assigning organizations and everything kind of flows. So that works out well. But you see that oftentimes in recruiting processes are ad hoc. People don't always follow the same processes, and that's a big challenge. And if I were to take a stab at this, I would say, one of the platforms that I've used before that I think does a great job, because it's not an HR operational or transactional platform, it's the data back end. It's a company called One Model. So what they do is they attach or connect to your data from your source systems or cloud data or what have you, and they pull it all into one data warehouse, right? Virtual data warehouse. And do all the data relationships. And then I've worked with clients that have implemented that and they have their own dashboards through One Model, but then they also give you the ability to access the data directly. So I've been able to connect directly to the backend data and create a custom visualization. So kind of plug for the folks over at One Model.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that. So let's see if we could make this better. This visualization, Kerry, what would you change or to make it better? How to probably, of course, everybody's saying that to be interactive, to add more dimensions to it, infuse some other data to it. But what else do you think? What were your thoughts of making it better?
Yeah, so I a lot of what has already been called out, I think that there's some opportunity just in terms of overall data viz hygiene, right? Even something as simple as a title is missing. I think that there would be some opportunity. Potentially data labels on your axes, right? Like, so the question was asked, what does that mean on the x-axis earlier in the session? So I think that there's some just basic hygiene that could help folks get to understanding quicker, which I think would, in every situation, is better. So I those are a couple what I'd consider low-hanging fruit. The other thing in thinking through this question ahead of time, and just in terms of if I had I think the question was, if you had a presentation, what would you do? I think so much about a data visualization is intentionality. What am I trying to visualize?
Exactly.
And if I pull out at kind of 50,000 feet and look at just this data viz, there's a lot of information here, right? We're talking almost 2 decades worth of information.
Mhm.
And as I mentioned, the article specifically, which again, I don't think anybody in the panel and or, folks who joined us today would know, and that's why I want to provide that context.
Mhm.
Again, the focus point was really on that large spike and the growing delta that's happening
Incredible.
over the last year or so. So again, I think maybe just intentionality in how you would present that. Now, listen, just like all things, there's a fine balance. You don't want to have such a small window and potentially distort an axis, right? Like there's also ways where you could take that advice and do it the wrong way. But I think intent, and then maybe just some sheer hygiene to really help get at some of the questions where there wasn't an easy understanding of what we were looking at. But like I said, I thought that I went back and forth even with myself on this. There's a lot to unpack. There's a lot of good. And I think with just some of those small tweaks, you could really get it from, kind of better to best.
That's right. That's right. So we have Aaron said from the chat, he said he would like to see the variance month over month or some type of variance, right? To say we can see if it's trending higher, but it's increased by less and less each month. We will see that the growth might be slowing down or something, trying to understand the trend of these two lines, maybe the variance between the two could be more helpful, right?
So I have to just chuckle. I think so. I wanted to focus specifically on the data viz, but I couldn't agree more. If you just wanted to get into the actual statistical rigor and maybe how do you translate something from just interesting visualization to something that has some meaningful information, not that this isn't, but just to, I guess, enhance upon that, like something as easy as some sort of data element or prompt, right? When that there's a statistical difference between the two, I think would be interesting. Then there's an entire different school of conversation if you wanted to get into the notion of, hey, is a 3-month moving average the right thing, right? What about a weighted average? What about exponential smoothing? So I don't want to get in too much into the kind of forecasting, but ultimately, I think that's a great suggestion. I forget, who particularly made that, and when I'm sharing my screen, I also can't see that chat list. But yeah, I think that's an amazing thing that could have been added for some additional value for sure.
So, John, what do you think that you could add or do differently in here?
Yeah, I think, like I said, adding some additional data, or if you're just taking this and looking to present this, in a presentation to an executive or a department head, really, I think focusing, right? As Corey said, this is 15 years of data, 16 years of data. It's a tremendous amount of information. There's probably one piece of this that you'd like to hone in on, right? So maybe it's you show the whole chart to give a macro level view, and then you chop it up into here's a 3-year or a 6-month change, right? It might be the change that we've seen at the very end, which is reflective of kind of the times we're in right now and the so-called Great Resignation. That might be the story that you're looking to tell here. So I really think it depends on what's the message you're trying to get across.
Perfect. So Jeff, do you anything that you said, or you think anybody else, or anything else that you can think that you can make it a little bit better, this visualization?
Well, the only other thing I would call out is, in fact, that spike, it is so big there at the end of the chart that, if you compare all of those years, right, outside of the recession, the spike almost is something that's like, I want some text or some data or some detail, because otherwise the data cleaning guy inside of me is going, are we sure that this is right? You know what I mean? So I have that. So I'm looking for how can I be justifiably certain, that that's right. So, and that's just the curiosity nature that I have because I'm looking at that data point,
Awesome. Thank you. No, this was awesome, Curry. Thank you for sharing this one. Good. So it's really good. Excellent. Let's Jeff, show me your visualization. I think you have a full dashboard that I think John and Curry will love, because they love, this type of data and visualizations. You have a full dashboard related to HR data.
Awesome. Let me know if you guys can see that.
Yes, we can see it. Ooh, nice. Nice. You're putting
Awesome. So
John opened his eyes now. His eyes are like, wow. So tell me a little bit about the dashboard. Tell me a little bit, Jeff.
yeah, so I will tell you when I went looking for a an HR report that kind of related to some stuff that I've recently been looking at. This chart, it stood out, and honestly, the thing that I really liked more than anything, and I'm going to refresh now, is the fact of how and new hire data and remaining employees here. I thought it's a cool feature, just because you can see not just your overall headcount growth over time, but you can also see what we're doing with headcount growth and what the new volume of people are. And of course, today we are very interested in new employees because in a lot of our companies, if you were hired in the last 18 months or so, you may have never even been into one of our buildings yet. So as far as that goes, we have a lot of interest in knowing who these folks are and what's the detail that surrounds them, as compared to some of the other folks who've been around and might have, a lot more adaptability to the things that we're going through as we look at return to office and that type of work. So this one segment of this chart was really interesting to me, and that's really why I pulled it out.
Okay. So can you go up a little bit just
Yeah.
to see the top again?
Yeah.
Okay. So Curry, what do you think? What was your first impression, Curry?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of good here, right? Just thinking in terms of what makes a good dashboard, right? And I'll just go kind of top to bottom. There seems to be an overall theme here, which is, hey, kind of a snapshot of our workforce at large, and then there's obviously a gender component or dimension that is clearly either depicted through the iconography in the top left, or even through some of the details of the charts. And again, starting top to bottom, you can clearly see, I'm assuming F for female, M for male.
Right.
Now listen, I think, that only having a kind of Boolean option there might be an area of opportunity, but I don't want to start. I think the intent is to give a quick hitter of what the mix is. So I like that. I like kind of that notion of a band, right? A big number, for lack of another way. So I think that's very nice. I also think, again, assuming the intent is just to give me a quick snapshot, like I can clearly see, and I'm focused on that bottom right-hand quadrant. I see employee growth, right? Like that's very easy for me to see. I see, a similar trend in separation, right? So you would naturally assume larger workforce, you're going to naturally see some, just increase in overall volume. Again, don't want to jump to maybe what could be better. I've questions, right? Because, is that really an increase, right, as the organization size increases, or is that just, part of, a growing organization? But yeah, I think a really good snapshot to look at the organization.
What do you saw, John Miller? What else do you see here that maybe you like or grab your attention?
Yeah, I think Corey actually did a pretty good overview. I think he hit all the points, the bands. It's providing a lot of different type of information, all in one view. Yeah, I don't think I have anything really additional to add.
Okay. Yeah, I think for me was and one of the things that I was trying to understand is, okay, it's an HR management dashboard, but it's maybe too generic, right? Like maybe I'm trying to understand what is this story? What is it that I'm trying to understand overall? What is the, I don't know, head count or something about my employees, but what is the story that it's trying to tell me? Also, the total employees maybe should be on the left. You know what I mean? Start with the highest, going lower, something like that. I don't know. But I was trying to understand what's the main story here.
Right.
I was trying to do that. I'm not sure if I can gather that. What do you think, Corey, was the main story, maybe, or were they trying to? It was just general KPIs,
Yeah.
maybe, of the.
So again, being in this space for a bit of time, I actually say this is probably pretty par for the course, and probably the first step. And I don't even think that's necessarily a bad thing. I actually really truly believe in the notion of crawl, walk, run. So you got to kind of start somewhere, and whether it's BI or just analysis in general at an organization, it's an iterative process. So much like you said, Yamil, I think part of this is it's somewhat of a data dump. Now, listen, at the same point in time, so I was looking up above at the top two graphs, the average tenure by active employees and total employees. Again, I'm not going to dive too deep into each viz unless you guys would like to, but it's a lot of information. What I believe the intentionality is there, right? In Group A, Group B, Group C is kind of like I would imagine functional group or some sort of, structural organizational kind of cut that makes sense for the business. But looking at both the ethnicity as well as the gender, and maybe that's what the group is each ethnic group. Again, don't know much about the back end data. It's just, it's a lot, right? So, when you say in terms of, you're right. I don't necessarily know if there is a consistent story to share here. But it feels very much like, hey, we tried to pack as much in as we possibly could. And then potentially, right, you lose some things. Like I'll even talk about the y-axis on those data viz with limited real estate, right? Potentially you dampen what you could maybe pull out as a trend or a bit of understanding. So just some visceral reaction to that.
So John, what is confusing to you? Like, is there anything that in additional to that you're thinking, I don't know about this. Like, it's confusing to me.
Yeah, I think so. Corey, made a lot of great points. I think it does provide a bunch of information in one place, right? But I think there are certainly opportunities as we think about decluttering the dashboard.
Okay.
Redundant axes. The bottom right chart, all the full names for the months. That are vertical instead of horizontal. I think really the top two charts could be horizontal bar charts instead of column charts. That way you get more information in that space if your intention is to see all of those groups compared to one another. I think adding more white space between the charts. Reducing labels, axes, kind of one or the other, like in the bottom left chart, separations. We don't need to see an axis of the value and the labels. The labels have an additional decimal point that we probably don't need. Attrition rate rather than pure terms is probably a more insightful view, as Corey said. That might just be a function of the organization growing, which you can see from the chart below. It is growing quarter over quarter. So those are a couple of things that jump out.
Awesome. So the chat is gonna explode. There's a lot of stuff here in the chat. So let's see where we can start. Let's see. So we have someone says that I like to see numbers % of on-site, remote, and flex workers. Sorry, that's one of the things. And James Emery, he had very good points. He said having two bars for part-time, full-time with the two headers, male, female, make it difficult to compare among groups. A stacked bar may work better. And so that's a very good point. And then we have Joe saying, this is interesting. What about a waterfall chart to show headcount, hires, and separation of each month? I really like that, Joe. That makes sense. I never thought about that. That's a very good one. And then Len says, from a color perspective, there's too much. Could we work the colors to tell a better story? My eyes doesn't know where to start because it's frightening to my attention. I agree with that. I didn't like that they changed the colors from the blue and orange to now this green on the separation. And I don't understand what is the reason of changing that. That doesn't make too much sense.
Not only that, Yamil, the orange and blue on the top represent full-time, part-time. and then below they represent employees versus new hire. So I'm using the same color dichotomy to represent two different things on the same dashboard.
Yeah.
Correct. Absolutely. No, that makes sense. This says separation should be, separation should be separation. Apparently there's that misspelling error there. So Len says color again, bottom left Viz seems out of step with everything else. Green doesn't seem to fit with everything else. Correct. Yeah, exactly what I thought.
The other thing I wanted to, and again, it's the more time you kind of take looking and seeing, right? Like if you look at the bottom half of this dashboard, it's over time, right? Whereas the tenure and the total employees, I'd imagine that's kind of top of stack, right? Based on the last refresh date of the dashboard or what have you. But, again, going to maybe solutioning a little bit, an easy way would be, a label there just to kind of call out what exactly am I looking at?
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, no, definitely. And the average tenure by active employees, right? I think that you can, just looking at it, I think that you can show something better than that to see that average, right? Maybe a line chart will be better, something that is easier than these bars,
right?
Because now we're talking about ratio and average or something, right? We're talking about something that you want to see how does it trend through time. And I don't think that this helps in any way in that particular one. For average. Let me see what else. Let me see if there's more in the chat. Let me see. What else? What else do you see, Jeff? What were you laughing at? Somebody put something in the chat.
There's a couple of things I want to call out too in here.
Yes.
So we talked about the padding around the different charts and to create some white space in there. So there's definitely that. There's redundant numbers here, like I don't need to know that's 599 and 400. I have 400, 600, you know what I mean? So it's like I wouldn't put any of those numbers there in all honesty. And then value doesn't add value to this chart. So, I would just kind of clean up the axis and the same thing on this other chart, I would clean those up. But then of course, from a pure Tableau perspective, when I hover over these, the tooltips could be telling us so much more. And, it's like these tooltips, they're basically the default tooltips that pop up when you create, the chart. So, rewording those data points that do matter in like more of a sentence. So instead of it looking like, the same old pop-up, but maybe reword some of that content to where it adds more to it as opposed to kind of, taken away. And then I really love the comment that, and I don't remember who mentioned it now, but, the full-time, part-time being the color differentiator here. And then we're using those exact same colors down here, but they have a different meaning, so again, and maybe this, I'm not trying to pick on this person or anything, but I just thought there's a lot of stuff that you could do. And all those things that we pointed out are probably things that really wouldn't take you very long to clean up. If you had, 5 or 10 minutes, you could probably really tune this up to where it looked a lot better. And then, maybe if you were, again, what's your target audience? Who is this being delivered for? What questions do they have? Maybe some of this is really addressing that audience. But, some of those cleanup things I would definitely do.
That's awesome.
Can I go against the grain for just 1 second? And everything that Jeffrey said, I would put my name and stamp and say I completely agree. But just in the spirit of this kind of type of conversation, and for those who are chatting or just joining us, the one thing I will say about data labels is I agree, right? Like if you use them, if you don't have an access potentially, right, to give some sort of context or understanding, or if you do have that, nice access, maybe you don't necessarily need it. And then obviously interactivity drives that as well. I will say again, and this is, I'm putting on my HR cap again, but just in the spirit of change, right? It's also important to understand consumption, who's going to consume and their readiness.
Yeah.
So it's not the world I live in today, but I've definitely been part of organizations that were, regardless if the solution was being developed in Power BI or Tableau or ClickView, MicroStrategy, whatever have you, they were going to print that thing to PDF, right? And the only thing I will say is just pause for awareness, or maybe go have conversations with the audience or the customer group you're working with, because sometimes you might actually have like a data viz faux pas, and it will actually work better for the audience. So again, I agree with everything Jeffrey said, but just in spirit of this, and I don't know the individual who created this, obviously. But if that was maybe an intent, right? I just wanted to call that out as a potential, bit to think through. So again, I'm speculating, but thought it was worth the
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Anybody else have any other comments, or not see in the chat? There was a lot of comments related to the axis. Of course, active employees by month is actually by quarter, apparently. Oh, yes, that's right. That's by month, but it's quarter. That's true. I didn't notice that. So you see underneath the 2016 or 15, it says quarter one, quarter two, but in the title it says by month. That is true. That's interesting. Thank you for that. So no, Jeff, excellent. Thank you so much for this visualization. I mean, that's the idea here, for us to like talk about it and see how we can, make it better. So John, let me see what you got. I can wait to see what you got for us today. You know how to share your screen?
I'm going to give it a shot here.
So it's, you just see it on the bottom. It should be like a little circle or something there so that you can share.
Yep. Are you guys seeing my screen now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah. All right. So this is, I violated a few of the rules that you laid out. One was, this shouldn't be something that you created. I created this. This is something that you see across the board when you're looking for, whether it's marketing analytics, recruitment analytics. I mean, it's essentially the same thing, right? It's either, it's people moving through some sort of process over time. And so, a lot of times it's lead generation. Does that convert to a sale? On the recruitment side, are they applying, interviewing, getting an offer, getting hired? So I basically just recreated something I've seen many, many times, something that I've used in the past, early in my career as well. So just want to kind of put this out there. It's the recruitment funnel. So everything I said from apply through hired. And it's showing the funnel and the number of candidates at each stage throughout that process.
Okay. So this is all the kind of like the pretty much, it's a funnel, and then you can see kind of like how many actually were hired, right? From the apply to the bottom to the hire. Okay. Cool.
That's right. And so I've got a couple of things I want to show after this, kind of improvements that I've looked at, but I figured let's just pause and kind of get people's reactions and talk through the actual viz that we're seeing. Because like I said, if you look at any number of vizes on Tableau Public or any HR related vizes, this inherently you'll see this. This definitely shows up. You may have used it in the past. Like I said, I definitely have. So I'm interested in hearing folks' reaction. Yeah,
I have some experience with this, which I could show one that I did before, but I don't have it in hand. But let me see, Jeff. What do you think? And I will tell you what I did with mine later at the end. So Jeff, what do you think?
I like the simplicity of what I'm looking at. The fact that it's pretty obvious to see the amount of people, right, who applied, and yet, the ones who get all the way down to that offer stage, you can see what that conversion rate is. So it makes me want to know, a little bit more that the dashboard doesn't just offer. So it seems to give just a simple amount of data, and makes me want to drill into it a little bit more.
So what do you think, Corey? Have you probably seen this before, Corey, in your
Yeah.
job? Yeah, every day.
Yeah. So what I really like about it is what John said. I know we're talking specifically about recruitment data, but shoot, I mean, this could be everything from looking at top line revenue of an organization down to net profit, right? I think John mentioned the sales funnel as well. So many times I think I hear people use that word funnel, right, in conversation. So I think one really neat thing about this Viz is it helps you get from concept to concrete, right? For those who might not like where those are just words, right? And some folks might have problem, moving from, conceptualizing and fully having that understanding. I think in a very, very simplistic way, this again, it visualizes that notion that you start with kind of your universe and you go through steps, and that at each step, right, there's a filtering action that's occurring. And I think that's naturally implied as you look at a shape like that.
Yeah. So I have used this, John, to give you an idea for when you are tracking how many people enter in your website and how many people are actually buying, right? So you have your funnel on top of your funnel of how many people engage with the website, how many people actually move to the offer, and how many people, let's say, actually bought something on the website, right? So I've used it through something like that, and it's very successful, I think, with executives or with most people, because they understand that. So that's the good thing about it. They understand, hey, I started here, I ended here, and they understand that. That's what I like about this type of funnels. So what you were going to say something? Just let me. What else you wanted to share?
Yeah, so I just wanted to react to my own Viz in a way. So essentially my position on this, it's kind of evolved over time. This Viz, I think, this isn't terrible, right? A lot of times when I work with this data, and to do a true data-driven funnel, right, these are the things that you see. But usually when you look at a funnel like this, or many times I look at a funnel like this, you see a very wide at the top. And by the time you get to interview, it is so narrow. And then it's basically like a column from interview down, right? It's very difficult to draw insights from, other than just seeing the data as is. And I think a lot of times folks get turned off from it because it's this like misshapen funnel. Even though it's data driven, it's reflecting the actual data. I feel sometimes what I've noticed is that people kind of get distracted from that. And so while it's not data driven, my position has evolved over time to where I think something like this, even though the actual shapes aren't driven by the underlying data, I feel like something like this tends to work better. To tell us, to tell a story, and basically just showing the raw numbers in each stage and showing how it funnels down to the bottom. But then I think it's best to use something like this coupled with a Viz that is data driven, right?
Correct.
So, for example, you might look at something like this, but then want to know how have things changed over time, right? And that could be either the raw number of folks in these stages, or it could be the percent pass-through rate and how that changes over time. So I have an example that looks at the same type of data. It looks at each stage and the number of candidates there, and then it shows how that's changed over time. And I think that when you couple the two together, right, again, to add context to what you're seeing, that's when you start to get a little bit more information in terms of what's going on.
Awesome.
Can I react to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Please.
So looking at this recruiting funnel, I completely agree, right? What a better way to look. But just in going what you said in terms of it being data driven, John, and I honestly, whatever the last, I think it was TC 17 or 18, it was in New Orleans, but I had an opportunity to meet Ryan Sleeper, and I mentioned his name earlier, and I'll mention it one more time because something he said really stood out to me, which is a logical construct that follows the data is still data driven, right? And to your point, I understand that the size of the shape doesn't necessarily match the proportionality of each stage. but it still relays what we know is happening, which is a reduction at each piece. So anyway, it was just another way to agree with you. But I think it's still data driven in the sense that the number is reducing, right? Obviously visualized in a different way, and I think a more palatable, digestible, and understandable way, to be quite frank, because you aren't necessarily uh, again swayed by some of the size. And I don't want to get into pre-attentive science, but at the end of the day, human beings have a stimuli response model in terms of how we see the world, right? Some of the things that have biologically helped us shape, size, color, movement, but area tends to be a topic that human beings struggle with, right? It's just we do. Tabular data is another one, right? That it's just hard for human beings to quickly see and synthesize in an easy and efficient way. So I thought this was great. I love this. The improvement, it's nice to kind of see that Viz time on time, but I like that idea of a logical construct, even if it isn't pixel perfect to the proportionality at each stage. I really liked it.
So what do you think, Jeff? What do you think? Well, I've just seen this before, right, Jeff? In your company and stuff like this.
Oh yeah, I completely agree with everything that the guys just said. And it's funny because one of the things I went over to the middle school today to do a session on data viz, and I spent a fair amount of time on pre-attentive attributes and being able to make a decision based upon something at a glance without having to think about it. And so, granted, just like you had mentioned, everything isn't exactly proportional, but my brain says it's perfect, and I think that's the overall theme is what is the story that this Viz is telling us? And, I love it. I think this looks really clean and tells a good story. It also highlights the fact that people are applying for jobs they have no business applying for. So
That's right. That's right. One of the things that I like, John, I think after, like behind the scenes, I will have to show you that other one that I did because I cannot show it here. But one of the things that I did, for example, is very similar to what you have here right now, is I put in the tooltip, I put all the trend over time, right? So when you hover to each area, then you have the trend over time. The other thing that I did was I made the funnel the main the main thing on the dashboard, right? And then what was happening is with the parameter, you could select different questions. So what do I really want to see? Do I want to see the top of the funnel to the bottom of the funnel? What is that what is that specific ratio from the top to the bottom? Or maybe it's from the middle to the bottom of the funnel, right? So it depends on what answer that user wanted to know. And then also another thing that I did was I used some icons to tell people like a hand like this, like means like they're going out of the funnel or something like that, like these ones were lost from the funnel and things like that. I mean, but this is, what I really like about this type of visualization is that a lot of people can understand them and people understand, that you started here and you're here. And another thing is you can put, if you have different channels. So for example, if you're doing sales, you can have like 3 different funnels, right? And each channel is one funnel. So I also did something like that. And then you can see that one channel is more effective than the other channel and things like that. So those type of things always help. But this is very successful. This is type of visualization that you can definitely take advantage because people understand them, right? They can understand how this works without thinking too much.
Yes.
Yeah. So what else in addition to recruiting have you used it for anything else in HR that you can think of, Curry or John?
So from an HR service center perspective, similar flow in terms of ticket requests or request types, and then ultimately down through a resolution. So generally, again, it follows a pretty structured workflow. And I think that this could be really used for anything that does.
Awesome. So, John, have you used it for anything else or anything that have you done anything other enhancements to it or Have you ever thought of putting any colors on it? I don't think they needs it, but I was just wondering.
Yeah, I've definitely done something like that, and I don't have it in this one. What I've done before is do like kind of even this line chart color
Mhm.
coordinated so that if it's below or above, you might see blue versus red or something like some sort of indicator. Um, but I also have a bonus chart just to share the kind of same information, but in like in Senti format, just to
Oh,
say,
nice.
hey, here's another way to look at the funnel. And then you have different rejection reasons, right? So again, not only showing the funnel, but then adding context. I think a view like this is key.
I
I
love
like this. Okay, this is good. Okay.
Can, just going back to the second funnel, I think one of the, John, you had mentioned diversity and inclusion, and that's just one dimension. But I think a side by side is a really good use of a similar visualization like this, where you're looking at a particular. Maybe it's just the organization. This is the recruitment funnel for the entirety of the org, and then you have a side by side, same visualization where you can start to split on any one dimension. It really helps you parse out maybe where you have opportunity.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Awesome. I really, really like this. Really like this idea.
Yeah.
So, we're almost done, pretty much, unfortunately. But thank you so much for bringing that today. I mean, that's definitely awesome visualization. I always love those type of funnels. I mean, there's so much you can do with them, to be honest. So definitely a very great visualization that anybody should use in some way or another, right? You can also, I think, you can use that in any dashboard, like part of your dashboard, in addition to other visualizations, right? So that's something very powerful. When you filter something, then it will just filter that funnel too. But that's thank you so much. Thank you so much. So I wanted to ask. I always ask this to at the end of the show to everyone, but Jeff, you have done this a couple times, so you can pass today. But I wanted to ask Curry, what do you think about? What do you think is the good thing about talking about visualizations? Anything that you learned today, or anything that you like about doing this type of discussion?
Yeah, I'll be brief just on time. I think exposure is important, right? And not just with data viz, but a lot of things in life, right? I think the more you can work in senses of community, it gives you just a natural opportunity to get exposed to new concepts, new conversations, and truth be told, it offers you an opportunity to reflect as well, which I think is powerful.
Awesome. So, John, what can you tell us? What do you think about this? I mean, we do this before. You remember when we were in I think in Alteryx conferences, in Tableau conference. Sometimes we are in just one table looking at our dashboards and things like that.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think this has been perfect. It's great to kind of get together and see folks that I haven't seen in years now because we haven't been together in Alteryx or Tableau conferences or other conferences. But I think to answer your question, right, you get together and you share different perspectives. We all come to the table here with, even though it's similar content, and that's kind of our bread and butter, we all come to the table with different perspectives. And so being able to share that and help each other grow and to grow ourselves, that's really what the community is all about. So, awesome job today. Good for you guys putting this together.
Thank you. So, Jeff, anything else that you wanted to say? You always have great things at the end of this show to say.
Hey, another great episode for the team here, and I think everyone wins when we look at data together. So I just wrap it up at that.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. And like I said, next week we have Thanksgiving Day. I started already today. Probably going to use this next week too. And happy Thanksgiving to everyone here, to John, to Jeff, to Curry, and their families. And enjoy the probably everybody will be some days on vacation, so enjoy that too. And hopefully see you next week. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
Bye-bye.